It goes on for 3 or 4 hours.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the Warrant Committee. Our meeting this evening in this beautiful Council on Aging. It's really quite a pleasure to be here. We had a great presentation by the Council on Aging at one of our Warrant Committee meetings very recently. It was wonderful with the grace that they showed. And so I would hope that as we conduct our meeting with regards to this important issue, the school, this plan swap, that we can conduct ourselves with the same kind of grace that they showed here at the Council on Aging, because we are all aging. We are all aging. And so I would hope that we can proceed as they did before our meeting. So we'll do things a little bit differently tonight. I'm going to ask, for purposes of our roll call for establishing our quorum for this meeting that we are having, that each of the members introduce themselves so that we can, make that record. I'll start with myself. I'm Dave Humphreys, the chair of the Warrant Committee.
Amanda Serio.
Steve Geister.
Allison Gagnon.
Lori Connolly.
Tom Caldwell. Steve Bryans.
Kristen Cosio.
Judy Steele.
JJ O'Connor.
Jay Funman.
Emily Cavalier.
And then, hey, Jereme. And then we are ably assisted by our clerk, Karen Bosworth. Thank you for your help tonight. I declare a quorum and I call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda tonight is a presentation by the School Building Committee with regards to their article. Mr. O'Rourke, taking the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you could do the public access DP presenter. Essentially, for the formality, I'm going to charge the chair of the School Building Committee, also precinct member, town meeting member, precinct 8. With me tonight is Mr. Zulus.
Hi, I'm Mike Zulus. I'm on the school building committee as well.
All right. That's that. Just trying to share. You guys gotta allow me to share my screen. Sorry about that. So the presentation that I have is essentially encompassing both of the articles that we have tonight. Similar to previous presentations, if there are questions, feel free to chime in. Don't wait till the end. Happily stop, do whatever we need to do. So try this one more time. Yes, sir. Thank you. And I don't have to say, can you see it? Because I can see it in front of me. That's great. So our committees, as I mentioned previously, are made up of 9 members. The 5 of us at the top are a mix of design and construction professionals. At the bottom left is Betty White and Selena Miranda, which are school committee appointees. And to the bottom right is Mr. Zulus and Glenn Hoffman, which are select board appointees. What you see before you now is a little busy, but essentially what it is a timeline of the school building committee. There are commentary that I've heard that, the topics before us tonight have been rushed, and I just want to walk people through an overall timeline. So the school building committee was formed in February town meeting in 2019. Shortly thereafter in 2020, we started to study for land around the town, searching for any available parcels that were there. In Q3, we issued a RFP to basically purchase land. There were 0 responses. And then I had taken over a chair essentially at the town meeting in the winter of Q4 2020. And, my first goal that I announced at that town meeting is our next step is to find land. Following that winter, we went through, started working down a number of parcels that we looked at, public and private. And then by the end of that spring, beginning of the summer, we started focusing on Gow Road. We announced Gow Road in the Milton Times in August of that year of 2021. And then essentially from there forward, we consisted with public engagement, a number of town meeting member presentations, informational forums, and actually one-on-ones with concerned citizens. During that time too, the school committee voted for a middle school option, which is what we're working towards now. So leading up to last town meeting, we secured all the necessary votes we needed with the previous parcel that we were going with, Conservation Commission, school, select board, and Warrant committee for all those votes. Prior to that town meeting, we came up with the options that you're going to see tonight, and basically pulled back at that town meeting, basically listening to some concerns that were there. Over the summer, we engaged BSC Engineering to essentially do survey work for us that helps us show kind of what we're doing. But during that time, Fompon became an option, and we kind of pivoted and chased down Fompon, as fast as we could. And there was, a lot of work put into that. At the same time, we were doing a parallel path with Gile Road. In December, we realized Fompon was declining to sell to us. So we resurrected the survey work and voted on what we call School Building Committee Parcel 2. And the green dot you see is basically this meeting that you see here tonight. So the main driver of this project is our over-enrollment. Currently, the yellow line that you see there is the capacity of the schools. And as you can see, we've been operating essentially one grade level above the capacity of the schools for a number of years. Knowing that we're over capacity, we also have oncoming 40B projects and MBTA zoning that's further going to contribute to that overcrowding. So as I mentioned, the school building committee came up with the idea of creating a new upper middle school at the Gile Road campus. And basically what we look at is the high school and the new middle school basically create an educational campus at that location. The Pierce Middle School, which is overcrowded, will now go down from 3 grades to 2 grades. And then the elementary schools would have 5th grade and preschool pulled out of it. So essentially creating space there. The additional space we created at the Pierce Middle School can house some of the administrative offices at the high school. So this one project addresses overcrowding at every level. So again, when we look back at those numbers and we pull out the pre-K and the 5th grade, you can actually see those numbers drop below the capacity line. So we, in our opinion, solved the equation. Quickly, I just want to touch on classroom conversions. As you've seen in our video before, there were classrooms in the gymnasiums. There are classrooms on stages where kids sit on the floor. There are teachers that shuttle from room to room with carts, breaking up and setting up, breaking down and setting up before each class and after each class. We have kids in hallways. This, in the Collycott Cunningham Library, as I mentioned before, this is the classroom that's in the corner of the library that houses 2nd grade. And then essentially what that did was in the middle of the library, it squeezed it down. So there wasn't really a lot of space for the kids after they created that. In the background, you actually see office space that's there too. Recently, the cold spell that we had a couple weeks ago, there was a pipe that burst at Cunningham. It took out 2 classrooms. So those 2 classrooms had to get reshuffled around. First space they went to is an existing teacher's conference room, and that conference room then had to get moved up to the stage of the Collycott Cunningham cafeteria. So that's essentially the working space for the teachers of Cunningham. The other one, this is a panoramic of that library that I just showed. The middle of that library right now has a new classroom in it. Now, it's not caused by the overcrowding, but it's indicative of how tight space is. Once those rooms were affected by that flood or the pipe burst, this is what they have to go to kind of accommodate the students. The other one that comes up too is, a number of times you hear the term educational excellence. With the overcrowded facilities that we have, and the underfunding of the schools, per pupil expenditures, I don't know how we're going to achieve educational excellence. The school building committees housed with or are charged with addressing the overcrowded facilities, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about tonight. In regards to site selection, as you're aware, we identified parcel D656A as our preferred site for the school, mainly due to the synergy of the high school campus that's there, and also a lack of any other options that we found throughout the town. So what you'll see tonight, and basically what we did is a difference from our presentation last year, was we've pulled the site back 300 feet off Blue Hills Parkway, preserving the ecologically valuable portion of the site there and maintaining the view along Blue Hills Parkway of a wooded front. Also, there's a 50-foot conservation buffer against Home Inc. and additional conservation land up behind Home Inc. and Brooksfield. So as I mentioned, the school building committee voted for what we call school building committee parcel 2, which is shown here. What you can see here, the first part is we realigned Gow Road, shown in red. So it's basically moves the road over. Then we created a 50-foot conservation buffer with Home Inc. And inherent to that too is a 50-foot zoning buffer. So essentially it's a 100-foot buffer with Home Inc. The 300-foot conservation buffer that we did along Blue Hills Parkway, and then the additional land behind Home Inc. that we did there. Overall, metrically, we're using a third of the conservation land that we were previously using of the overall parcel. For the park parcel, we're using 1/3 of that. This was the proposal that we had last year. Basically, as you can see, utilizing a large portion of the conservation land. This is kind of our proposal that we have now. We're engaged with DRA Architecture to do a similar conceptual design on this parcel so people can see. The intent of this is where the dashed red line is, that's the zoning buffer from Home Inc. Our intent is not to put the school directly at the edge of that buffer. The intent is to move the school as far away as possible. Sure. No problem. Yep. So similarly, we use the mapper function that we have on the Muni Mapper to kind of get an estimate of how far the boundary is from like the nearest house at Home Inc. So from Home Inc. to that boundary line is approximately 75 feet with a 50-foot conservation buffer and then another 50-foot zoning buffer. So roughly about 175 feet from the edge of the home. There's a site walk this Saturday morning, 8:30 at Gow Road. Part of the BSC work that we did out there, or those lines that we saw on maps, are actually staked out there every 50 feet. So as we walk the site on Saturday morning, you'll be able to physically see where those boundaries exist. For the land swap, we've added some parcels in. So as we're talking about this, there are going to be two ratios they talk about. One is an Article 97 ratio. The other is a conservation ratio. So specifically talking about Article 97, for Herrick Drive, we have the two parcels that we had previously, which are shown in yellow and blue, and then a new parcel that we've identified on School Street, shown essentially in purple or pink, depending on how your eyes see it. The other one that we've, yeah.
Could you go back to
Of course.
you had the state,
The stakes?
the flags? Yeah,
Yep.
please.
Can you say a little bit more about Saturday morning?
Yeah,
Can anyone join?
anyone can join. It's a public meeting.
Where and when will we join?
At Guile Road and Blue Hills Parkway, basically where the parcel is located. It's a public meeting between the Conservation Commission and the School Building Committee, similar to what we did last year for people to walk the site and actually see it. And we'll be going through all the parcels that I talked about today.
So the flags that we're seeing,
Yeah, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
if the flags that we're seeing now, or if we were to go down there ourselves and just take a looky-see, these flags indicate the setback from the senior housing or the setback
Yeah.
help me with that one.
No, it's fine. If I may, I'll just go back to the map and do
Okay.
my best to point to it. So drive on this. So there's one set of yellow flags that run across the property here to identify the 300-foot setback. For Home Inc., you'll see multiple flags there. So there was one set of flags hitting the edge of the boundary and then 50-foot setbacks all the way through. So you'll see a set of flags that represent this 50-foot setback. Then you'll see another set of flags interior to that shows the zoning buffer. And there's also additional flags inside of that if we were able to kind of cut it back, but we weren't able to based on the parcels that we're looking at. So when we go out there, as you walk through, we'll enunciate all that to everybody so they know which flags are the correct ones.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right. So the Herrick Drive parcels, like I talked about, there are the two existing ones that we had as part of last year's swap, and then the new one kind of shown in purple or pink here on School Street. The other one that was similar to what we talked about last year is a parcel along Randolph Ave right across from the Cottage School, I believe it is, the Carriage House School. And that parcel there, it's the middle portion of it. The ends of it are currently conservation land. The middle portion is not. So we'd basically be unifying it with the adjacent parcels. So there was a lot of questions that came up last year of what this parcel looks like. You know, some people talked about it being wet and other things like that. So I actually went up and started taking pictures. On the left-hand side, you can actually see the traffic on Randolph Ave. And then there's a small brook that runs along that parcel. Everything else going uphill is all upland land. Similarly, when you're at the top of it, looking down, you can see there's no wetlands that are up there.
I think Herrick Drive came up as a discussion of being wet, or do we have photos of that?
I didn't have any photos of that. I only did the Randolph Ave one. The Herrick Drive one, we're not contesting isn't wet.
Okay.
It's mainly right next to the brook, so we're aware of that there. I just wanted to do the Randolph Ave one because that's the largest one that we're including, and it was the one of question before that I just wanted to make everybody aware that it is not.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is the Randolph Ave one near the new, I don't know if it's contested or past 40B development?
So there's a couple 40B developments that are up there. There's one that's occurring across the street by the DPW yard. And then there's one looking in this photo going, so Boston is, you know, if you're looking through the photo, Boston is in that direction, north. And down there where the horse farm is, where the access road, I believe there's a 40B going in right there also. So
is this is the one it's across from Carriage House. So as we're heading back into Milton, it's on that.
correct.
Okay,
So yeah, if you look to the left here, the Carriage House School will be on your left-hand side.
thank you.
One other one that became available, or we became aware of this year too, is a parcel on the corner of Highland Street and Canton Ave, right next to the police station. That one's about 5 acres too. So when we talk about Article 97, for us, we'd be turning into Article 97 over 15 acres of land, and we'd be taking out approximately 7.26. So it essentially a 2-to-1 ratio. Now, one of the other ones that will come up that we'll talk about tonight, yes, sir.
So what's the difference between active recreation and conservation?
So active recreation technically could be built upon for fields, parks, or stuff like that. The conservation land currently could not.
All right, so the active recreation isn't what we would think of when we think of conservation land. Like they could currently build on, is
Yeah.
what you're saying.
They could, the parks. So the parcel that we're talking about there for active recreation includes Brooks Field. So Brooks Field is constructed on that same parcel. It extends all the way over there. So for this, we're carving off a small piece of the same parcel that Brooks Field actually sits on too. So, you know, to give a picture to what it is, Brooks Field, if you could build it on there, you technically could without anything, or the Parks Department could.
Are you taking away, not to interrupt Dave,
No, go for
are
it.
you taking away from the fields being used for recreational to build on?
Well, that's a tough question because there's no fields that are currently there in the part that we're taking. So technically, if they wanted to build that out at some point in the future, yes. But as part of our project, we are building fields, we are building parking. So
You're building
it's-
fields at
it's-
the guy, because last time we spoke, now what kind of size fields are we building?
not sure yet. We haven't even got there with the architects yet. But as part of the school component, they have to have fields as part of them.
And what would they be used for? The
Schools.
lower grades or?
Well, it's 7th and 8th grade. So part of what we're trying to do is we're trying to utilize some of the fields that are already there so we can save on construction costs. That's part of the allure of, having this parcel, that we can use some of the synergy of the existing site.
The ones that are at the high school right now?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have challenges using currently because there's so many people that we have a need for fields.
Yep.
Yeah. Just curious. Okay. Sorry, Judy.
No,
No,
that's good.
it's totally fine. Right. So one of the other ones that comes up is for the parcels that we're talking about, the portion of the active recreation and the portion of the conservation land, we will be taking those by eminent domain. That is one of the articles that you have in front of you tonight. As part of the consideration paid to the Conservation Commission, Pope's Pond currently is not deeded to the Conservation Commission, so we would be changing the deeded ownership of Pope's Pond to the Conservation Commission. And when we look at that again through the lens of conservation land, we're turning into conservation those previous 15 acres that I had there, along with an additional 41 acres of Pope's Pond, creating 56 acres. And then we'd only be taking 2.8 acres out of conservation. So the ratio of that, I think, is like 20-1. Yep.
The part in your Pope's Pond is called
Beverly.
Peverly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Peverly
Park.
Beverly
yeah.
Park.
And I had attended a CPC meeting way earlier in the year, and it was under consideration for a CPC project at Peverly Park to build a playground. And I believe that they've just funded the group wanting to build that small playground, $40,000. And so how does that affect this project that's already on its way, in a way?
Yeah. So I've been in discussion with Chair Kiernan. He's actually here with us tonight from the Conservation Commission regarding that.
Mm-hmm.
So with the deeded ownership to the Conservation Commission, they could still build the park there. It would just have to be out of the jurisdictional of the wetlands.
So they would now need extra permission from Concom?
I can't answer that because I don't know.
Who has the deed now for the Hope Pond?
For my understanding for it is the town essentially has general municipal land.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I want to follow up on that because I don't know if you're the person to talk to or Conservation Commission or who, but a few minutes ago we said on parkland you can build a soccer field, on conservation land you can't. So, yeah, the question about can we build a playground is still sort of hanging out there. I don't know if we can carve that out and not make that conservation land or what the solution might be, but
Ms. Kiernan?
I think I can answer the question. I'm John Kiernan. I'm chairman of the Conservation Commission.
great.
And you've asked some good questions, but there are actually two kinds of conservation land, at least. One is the ownership, the deeded ownership. The other one is jurisdiction. So your question is really a jurisdictional question. Can you build on conservation jurisdiction land? And the answer is yes, sometimes, and no, sometimes. And I'll show you. If you can call up the Pope's Pond map, I think I can point it
Okay.
out to you. do you have another picture that shows the pond?
The pond is kind of.
Oh, that's hard to see. Okay, it is there. This is an oddity in the state act, but under the Wetlands Protection Act, our jurisdiction is 100 feet from the resource area. Under the Rivers Protection Act, which is part of the Wetlands Protection Act, the jurisdiction is 200 feet. But the 200 feet is from Pine Tree Brook. So there's a 200-foot buffer, if you will, jurisdictional buffer from the stream. But when you get to the pond itself, it reverts to 100 feet. Now, the only reason that I'm bringing that up is that with the 200-foot line from the stream, the inner riparian zone, which is the first 100 feet, you cannot build on that. That's a state requirement. The second 100 feet you can, but it would have to go to the Conservation Commission for permission to build Beverly Park. 4 months ago, we actually formally passed a resolution, the Conservation Commission, in public session and supported the CPA application for the playground. So there's a lot of support from the Conservation Commission formalized through a resolution to support the playground. But it would have to be in the outer 100 feet, not the inner 100 feet. Or you could move it closer you could actually move it away from Canton Avenue and go up closer to the pond. And then the limitation under the town bylaw is 25 feet. This is a non-disturbance zone. But it would be a 100-foot jurisdiction. So there's a lot of places to put. You have to kind of move it around. And the CAD drawing is exactly what the engineers do and the surveyors do. But so your question is, multifaceted, but we've got strong support within the Conservation Commission to support the Beverly Playground.
Okay. It's almost a triangular shape, so I think what you're indicating to me, it would go, it comes to the pointed part down at the Canton Ave, and then it spills out. So you're saying more up at the
Depends on the shape of the playground, but your point is correct. You'd have more space
to the
if you
fuller
push it
part
away
of
from
the
Canton Avenue.
triangle.
Yes.
Okay,
But you can change the shape of the playground too.
you can. Okay, so thank you.
So, again, just, looking at conservation land that we'd be turning in roughly 56 acres and taking out of conservation only about 2.8 acres. So overall, kind of a map of the town of the land that's going into conservation, just to give it some scale, and land that's going out of conservation is, shown in red, right next to Pope's Pond. Essentially with that, that's my presentation, but obviously we'll open up to any questions.
I have one. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just going to ask, can you
Yes, sir.
provide us that presentation? Because there's a lot of data in there and I'd like
Yeah.
to study a little bit.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely.
Did you have a feasible study of why we couldn't build off of any of the existing schools that you could provide as to why this is the next option versus build it? Because I did see the drawings from the 2019.
Yep. Space study.
Yeah. So, and I was never able to find a feasible study why we couldn't build off, and that said it was done on Glover.
So essentially what happened is there was a public records request recently for that. There is no formal feasibility study. Essentially what happened was when the schools were originally built, they were aware of the foundation capacities, and the foundation capacities couldn't take a second level on there. Taking it even further, the current program is to build an upper middle school to address everything, right? So to put an upper middle school over the Glover, we wouldn't be able to do it. So that portion of expanding the existing schools that we talked about before it doesn't work technically because there's operations to the school that occur, cafeteria being the most crunch point. So you have to push kids in and pull them out throughout the course of a day. Right now, they've expanded as far as they can. So theoretically, if you could add 10 classrooms on each school and say you're done, you couldn't push or pull the kids through the cafeterias at the right time. So you have to build a new cafeteria on top of that also. And that's where the domino effect of that stuff to do it doesn't work realistically when you start really digging into it. The other part that comes in too is that only addresses the elementary schools. We have a problem with the middle schools. This project addresses at the middle school.
The study that was done though in 2019 showed how you could add on to the middle school though.
Yeah, there was a problem with that one because that interviperian zone that Mr. Kiernan was just talking about, the brook that runs behind there, the option that they didn't take that into account, and where they realigned the road to build out the backside of the middle school doesn't work.
I'll have to look at the, okay, we can.
Do you
So
have enrollment data for the upper grades too?
yeah. So we haven't I only showed the elementary school levels because by stripping those grades out, that was the most dramatic ones that's there. Pierce obviously is over enrolled. I think it's roughly around a little over 900 kids. Once we pull a whole grade out of that, it's kind of inherent that we are creating space there because we're going from 3 grades down to 2. But we do have all the data for that. I'll happily share it so people can see it.
Yeah, because if their enrollment's down to 900, I mean, that's a lot less than it was when my daughter's now in middle school. It was over 1,000. So is it dropping off then, the enrollment?
Not really. So you see some attrition there for upper schools, whether it's BC High, any of the schools that extend their grade levels down to that. But the problem is the numbers are so high feeding into the middle school that they kind of need that attrition just to stay, where they're at. So even with the middle school being over enrolled, we've done looks at, how much attrition really happened with that, going from 5th grade up to 6th grade and then following along. And if you trend the numbers out, they do go down, but not enough to kind of alleviate what they're already experiencing up there for overcrowding.
But is the number leaving to go to private school increased over the past few years?
That I haven't looked at. I'm just looking at the total numbers that are there and the total numbers. And I throw 900 out just as a round number. I think it's more like 950 or is higher around that number. I can pull them up if you need me to, or I can just share them afterwards.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
Yep.
I have one question
Yep.
about going back to in the presentation, which was super helpful. So thank you. The classroom in I think you said it was a 2nd grade classroom. I'll admit it brought back bad memories because I attended a school with pods where we were all in partitioned rooms in a huge space. It looked like those partitions aren't floor to ceiling, right? So the students in those rooms are hearing everything. Is that
There's
right?
no acoustical separation.
So, okay, so there's no separation. And then they also, I noticed that the outsides at least look fair. There's a little on the inside. I remember there being fire code issues around putting things on partitions. I don't know if it's different when they don't go from floor to ceiling, but I was curious about that aspect too. Like, are they able to use the partition walls in the way a traditional classroom has like so much kind of posted of the students' work, or do they have to be mostly bare? I'm just thinking about like the students in that classroom in that space.
I think the one thing you're seeing here are principals and teachers doing their best to play space planner and architect. And that's kind of what we've been dealing with for like 3 to 4 years, to the point now that there isn't more space for them to play with. And that's kind of where we're hitting this crunch. I know there's certain rooms that they're looking at the interior of the buildings to try to see if they can convert those to classrooms, but there's DESI requirements for exterior windows, so you can't put an interior room with students in it that never have natural daylight. So they're pushing the boundaries to see if we cut a hole in the wall, put a window in there that looks into a hallway, will that meet the requirements? So when I say they're at point break, like there's no more space. There is no more space. This is what the library looked like prior to that flood that occurred where that pipe burst. This is what the library looks like now. And again, it's just a panoramic library. The interior space of that middle classroom is a kindergarten. And it's just, a bunch of desks strung out there with, office partitions that are up in the middle. And then all the other kids that are using the library basically have that little space on the left. And that library actually serves both schools, Collycott and Cunningham.
One other just quick follow-up. I was curious if you have a total of the number of classrooms that are currently in that type of, I'm going to call it makeshift
Yeah.
space.
Yeah, I don't have it offhand. I did a while ago, and we can resurrect a lot of that stuff. It's tough because there are some classrooms that are in traditional there are some, I call them classrooms, but classrooms for students that are in spaces that were made for art and music previously and stuff like that. So those rooms have been cannibalized to say you're now a classroom where before it was the art and music room. We do have those numbers. I can, like I said, resurrect them and have them for next time I come.
Thank you.
So it seems, I mean, this eventually will be supposedly fixed, right?
Correct. Yes.
But
This
I think
is
for me, the bigger thing is there's no room for error. There's no room for anything to happen. Like if pick the next
unforeseen. Yep.
issue, you've already taken all of the space that there is. Like there's just now you're taking bad space and making it worse.
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit about eminent domain? Was that like how you said?
Definitely.
Yeah. So
Yep.
that was, I think, a new term from the last time. So can
Yep.
you just talk a little bit about what that means?
I'll turn it over to Mrs. Zulus for that.
I get the easy one. One of the threshold questions that the town will need to decide is whether we can use that 2.8 acres of conservation land for school purposes. The answer from town council is yes, if the town decides to pass these two articles, one being the land swap that Sean described, and the other being this eminent domain article. So let me just give you just a little background on that, and maybe a little background for some of the newer members about some of the history of that parcel and some of the documents. As you probably know, I'm just going to pull out the documents so I have them here. As some or all of you know, town bought the property, the 7.5 acres of conservation land back in December of 1978. It was part of a purchase of 22 acres. The total area was 22 acres. The purchase price was $170,000. Then there was a deed from the sellers for the property with certain restrictions in there. Keep the property, conservation, prune the bushes. There are a few restrictions in that deed. And one of the questions that has come up is, how long were those restrictions supposed to last? Now, the deed didn't say. There's nothing in the deed that says how long those restrictions are supposed to last. There's nothing in any document that says, from that time, that says these restrictions were supposed to last in perpetuity or forever. It could have been. The deed could have said these restrictions should stay in place for 50 years or 100 years or 200 years or forever, but it didn't. The grantor, the sellers of this property, the Lamb sisters, they could have created what's called a perpetual conservation restriction. We've had those at the same time. The Eustace Estate granted one of those in December of 1978 at the same time. They could have done that, but they didn't. What they did was to grant the land with these restrictions in them with no time frame. Now, according to the law, when there's no restriction in them, there's no time restriction, the restriction lasts for 30 years. Okay? And there's no other document, as I said, that says anything about in perpetuity or forever. There is one document from that time period, and that's the documents really can tell us the best of what was intended at the time. There is one document from August of 1978, before the property was sold. It was an application for a self-help agreement with the state. And that's the only document that says it is proposed that a conservation restriction be placed upon the conservation land as an added safeguard. So that was in the application for the self-help agreement back in August of 1978, before the sale. That was, oh, go ahead.
Self-help agreement.
That was an agreement with the state to try to get funding. Okay, so, but that application was superseded by the agreement with the state in November of 1978. Again, before the purchase, November of 1978, the state and the town, all the Conservation Commission members, and the chair of the then Board of Selectmen, and the Secretary of Environmental Affairs, who was Evelyn Murphy at the time, they signed a self-help agreement in November of 1978. No mention of any conservation restriction in the ultimate agreement. And in fact, to the contrary, what was in the self-help agreement was the agreement by the parties, including the town. The town agreed to use the property for conservation purposes only, unless the town, the participant, the town receives the appropriate authorization from the general court, the approval of the Secretary of Environmental Affairs, and any authorizations required under the statute, which is exactly what we're doing. In 1978, the town agreed to a process to use this property for other than conservation purposes. And that's what we're doing. We're following what the town agreed to do back in 1978 in this agreement. After that agreement was signed, the property was sold in December. Again, without any time frame for these conservation restrictions. So, we pointed this out and pointed these documents out at town meeting last year. Said there was nothing in there about perpetuity forever. Everyone agrees that it was intended that this property be used for conservation purposes. But nowhere ever in any of these documents was it supposed to be or did it say it was supposed to be forever. So after town meeting this summer, Home Inc. Hired a lawyer, and the lawyer sent us a letter, sent the town a letter. And again, the lawyer that they hired didn't say anything about a time frame or any document that said in perpetuity. What the lawyer said was, there's an argument, and there is a legal argument, that if you piece together all of these different facts, if you piece together some facts, there could be what's called a public trust created. And it was the opinion of the lawyer hired by Home Inc. that if you piece together the facts that he put in the letter, that they think there was a public trust created. Our town council said there are cases where there are some similarities to that. And so the answer for the town legally would be, rather than have a discussion in front of a judge and have this decided in a lawsuit, the answer would be to take the land by eminent domain. Now, for me, I have to say, we technically don't need this eminent domain article, right? We could just do the land swap. And then if Home Inc. wanted to pay this lawyer more money, we could get sued by Home Inc. And I happen to think from the documents we'd have a good case, but a judge would decide. A judge would decide whether we would be able to use this property for school purposes in the first instance. If we take it by eminent domain, the town decides. We decide. And what we are doing by eminent domain is, and this is a little bit nuanced, but the town owns the property, right? The Conservation Commission controls the property. Town owns the property. So the town would be taking the property from the town for the purposes of using it as a school. And that's it. And that's a response to the claim that there is somehow this public trust that was created in absence of any document creating it. Somehow there's a public trust created. So that is a response to that. The town could do that after a lawsuit. If the town lost the lawsuit, the town could then take the property by eminent domain and do it that way. And so the advice was from town council was, rather than have a judge decide this, the town can decide that it wants to take the property by eminent domain from itself. So that's, go ahead.
So you've said lawsuit like 5 times now. So you're expecting a lawsuit if you take it by eminent domain.
No, I think eminent domain answers. I mean, look, anyone can pay a lawyer to file a lawsuit, right? If we take it by eminent domain, that really ends the discussion. And you'll get the advice from Kevin Freitag.
We saw it, but there was no detail in it.
This is what's that? Yeah, this is no, but I assume he'll come and talk to you. But this is my view, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the advice was you could take it by eminent domain.
Have you ever taken conservation land by eminent domain before?
Has the town taken conservation land? I don't know. The town has taken land by eminent domain.
Like, has that ever been done
Not
before?
sure.
Okay.
Sure.
If anybody could get an answer for that would, like, if we could ask the attorneys. I'm just curious if it's ever been done before.
Sure.
And if the town does get sued, how much does that delay the school being built? Years, I assume? Because we've read other cases in Situate, and I think it was somewhere in Central Mass, where they did that. They got sued, it dragged it down 2, 3, 4 years before they could even start the project.
Well, it depends, right? I mean, if town council is right and the eminent domain taking solves the issue, it doesn't seem to be much of a lawsuit.
But does
But
it make
again,
it more sense to like add on to, like, let's say maybe not necessarily follow the 6th to 8th grade in the middle school, but like look at other options rather than if this could possibly delay and our kids are in immediate need, as we're saying. I haven't seen modulars put in to help us, like, alleviate some of the pain going on. But if it would it make more sense time wise if this could, to move and restructure the schools and let's say build off the elementary schools and maybe do just 7th and 8th in Pierce versus what seems to be could be a tough road ahead.
So, I mean, again, the eminent domain article is to make the road easier. Look, and as I said, anyone can hire a lawyer to file any kind of lawsuit if they want. They can spend their money however they want. Is it a viable claim? Is it a strong claim? If we take it by eminent domain, it's probably not. But to your question, are there other options? You have some very well credentialed professionals who've been working on this committee for hundreds of hours over the last 4 years, and there are no other options.
Well, I haven't seen. I mean, and I appreciate all your work, but I have yet to see anything done on adding. Only looking to build, and so that's why I asked the question. If I have yet to see feasible studies or anything, that's why I've asked to see what are our options in our locations, because we it looks to me that there's property there that we could expand off of.
So that's a separate question, and I'll let Sean take that unless there's anything else about this eminent domain article.
I have an eminent domain question. So I don't have the article in front of me right now, but does it say who we're taking it from? Because I guess, I do. I lied. I do have it in front of me. I guess I'm thinking if some people say this is owned in a public trust and some people say it is owned by the town of Milton, we don't need to do eminent domain to take it if it's owned by us. We only need eminent domain if it's in the public trust. So I get what you're saying about, I guess I'm just wondering how the mechanics work.
It's owned by the town of Milton regardless.
Well, I guess I don't know what the public trust is.
So the question is whether the town of Milton, by virtue of a court saying it's so, whether the town of Milton is required to hold the land in trust forever as conservation land. Okay. So if a court found that, then that's possible.
And so who represents the trust in that case to say, I don't know. I mean, if you take my house by eminent domain, you pay me a bag full of money.
Yeah. Here we're paying the Conservation Commission 50 some odd acres of land in
Okay.
exchange for 2.8 acres of land.
Okay.
So it's the town paying the town, but
And to the question, I'm not interested in if there's precedent for it in the town of Milton. I'm interested if there's precedent for it in the state of Massachusetts. We don't need precedent set by town, but this is a thing that happens. I don't know.
Again, we can ask town council. We follow the advice of town council on this. So, and that's what we've been advised is the response to, is there a public trust here? That's the argument.
Mm-hmm.
You can solve that argument by just taking it by eminent domain, and then you don't have to deal with the issue. Again, you don't have a judge deciding. You have the people of Milton deciding how to use this property.
Will there be a timing issue of there's no lawsuit, we think it's fine, we start building the school, and then someone sues and says there's a public trust, and suddenly it's too late to do eminent domain? No, like
I mean, a
if the
lawsuit.
public trust comes
lawsuit.
into existence after we start building the school. Am I just creating problems? Or
I don't think legally it's possible for a public trust to be established after the fact, after the town has already used it. That would have to be determined before that.
But this also opens up municipality to not just necessarily school being built, but the land being used for something. Let's say the school doesn't pass. Have we secured any funding for the school yet?
So just on whether we can use it for anything else, this is for school purposes. And
So
what we
that will be
had
in that
before,
article?
what we had before, and I suspect we'll have again in the recommendation, is a reverter clause saying if there's no funding appropriated for the school in 5 years, everything goes back to the way it is.
Okay.
So it's not going to be
Could be
used
used for development.
this 2.8 acres, this 33% of this property is not going to be used for anything else.
Okay.
And it's going to go, if there's no school there, it's going back.
Well, maybe we could put a field there for our kids.
Well, you can take that one. You can take that one.
Yes, no reversion, build a field.
I think that's
I'm
a
always-
good point. The town, I think we've seen this, that the town has such limited space. I mean, I do think that maybe there should be something to say for town purposes, or it reverts would be. But I don't know if that's a can of worms.
Our charge is to build a school,
Okay.
to provide space for school purposes. So that's not one that we're going to take on.
I'm just going to Mike. Sorry.
Hey,
Mr.
Steve.
Bliss.
Yeah, that's all right.
Question for you. Kind of a clarification question. So, taking this land by eminent domain. Thanks for the background. It's super helpful for me. Couple things. Are we setting a precedent by doing something like this? Meaning for me, right? So I walk into Cunningham Park with my dog every day. So what's to say that at some point we need more and we take that? So I guess the question to the team here: how is that land set up? Is that set in perpetuity so it can never be touched?
Cunningham Park.
Yeah, the woods behind there, up in that area. I
So
didn't grow up here, so I'm asking.
yeah, but just in terms of whether the town could take it by eminent domain, there has to be. First, the town would have to decide. The people of the town would have to decide. And if the people of the town wanted to do that, they'd have to pay for it, right? And so it's not. This is a unique situation, it seems to me. This is not a situation where we as a town are going to start deciding to take land and pay for it. First of all, we don't have the money to pay for a lot of land. So the idea that this is some kind of precedent, I have trouble seeing that. I just don't really see the reality of that.
Thank you.
Mike, if I'm reading this, and I'm hoping you can straighten this language out for me to understand, to authorize the select board, not necessarily, to acquire for general municipal purposes, including without limitation, school purposes by purchase, taking by eminent domain or otherwise. This thing without limitation including school permit. How are you going to put that back in? In other words, it seems to me this language has no limitation. You could eminent domain it and decide to build a water factory there. Water bottle factories, here we go. Everyone in Milton line up. But you really want to do a school, but somehow the school falls through for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But already you have this land by eminent domain without limitations.
Yeah.
So explain and really, if the judge will say, no other use but the school property. Explain that without limitation.
If it's not used for a school, it goes back to conservation land, and that'll be in the that was in the recommendation. That'll be in the recommendation. Now I don't know what town council has prepared on that article, but my guess is it'll be similar in the recommendation. That the recommendation may say just for school purposes and it'll go back. But I know the recommendation for the land swap said if there's no appropriation for school funding in 5 years, it goes back to conservation land. So
whose recommendation was that?
That's yours. That's the warrant committee's.
So if I may, I spoke to town council today about this because it's clear the language definitely says like general purposes. I don't think it's anyone's intent that this be taken for anything other than a school. And that if, it was a yes recommendation, then in our written recommendation, we would say, recommended that the town approve to be used for purposes, and then we could put the language in. If that did not go forward, it should revert, or whatever the proper word would be. Okay, so I spoke with Kevin Freytag about that issue today. And then the effect of that, if we did do that, would not interfere with the legalities of possibly going forward with an eminent domain. That if we put language that wouldn't take away their ability to proceed, because our language that we would put in our recommendation would not be binding upon them in such a way that it would prevent them from being able to proceed with eminent domain if that's what the town wished to do.
Yeah, and that's up to town. I mean, our recommendation is school purposes only, and if there's no funding for school in 5 years, it goes back to conservation. I think that's fair. That's what we recommended before.
That's my goal.
Yeah. We're not out there.
And we would see that somewhere in writing for
you would approve
those that might.
We would probably draft it.
Yeah, you would draft it.
We would
draft it.
Okay.
And that can be part of our conversation. I don't think we're going to be able to get to a vote on this tonight. We can have these conversations, but that will be part of our process. If when we draft we have the article before us, and then we would draft a recommendation. Would be the actual language that we would vote yay or nay.
Okay, thank you.
I'm confused about how a reversion would work. As part of the deal, we would put Pope's Pond into conservation land. If it reverted, Pope's Pond would go from conservation land to not conservation land?
No, it would be a boon for the Conservation Commission because this would just go back in. So,
the only reversion
would be... So the Conservation Commission would get something for nothing.
The only reversion would be this little parcel.
That's exactly right. That was the way it was considered. That was the way it was constructed last spring
That's not what I understood last spring, so maybe I wasn't paying attention.
Okay. But that's the way we suggested.
Can Sean talk about the question about whether there's ability to expand on the existing school facilities and building up or out or modular, all that stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. So the space study that was done prior to the formation of the school building committee was in 2019, done by DRA Architecture. At the time, they looked at The space needs at that point at the elementary school level was a total of 26 classrooms. They looked at multiple options. I think it was about 6 of them, and with priorities, construction costs, and recommendations of what they did. The 2 top ones that were there was construction of a new elementary school, which was most expensive, and then the construction of an early childhood education center, which is kind of what we're going to do at Fompon as a project. Their intent of that early childhood education center was to build 26 classrooms to house pre-K and kindergarten behind the high school, behind the field house. Everything else they looked at was ad hoc additions to the existing schools, but never added up to 26 classrooms as a total. Part of the other things that came in there were, as I mentioned, pushing kids in and out of the cafeteria, like the operationals of the schools, not physically can you build it, the operations of how those schools work. And it's not just classrooms, as I mentioned multiple times. You know, as you put more population into a building, HVAC gets taxed, you have to upgrade that. You have to increase your bathroom counts based on population that's in there. So it's not just strict classrooms. So once you start doing those and looking at them, the dollar values of doing multiple projects like that eclipse what it would cost to just build a new school. So that's where the idea, when they looked at it, their recommendation was just build a new elementary school. Again, that was 2019. The overcrowding that we've experienced now has migrated up to the middle school level. And at that time, they didn't look at the middle school. And that's why we, as a school building committee, stepped back, digested everything they provided us as a study, took another look at it and said, here's the actual better plan we can do. One project that addresses everything in the town.
And if I just add that the first 9 months of the work of the school building committee was to pressure test what the school facilities committee had done, and to determine for our purposes whether we thought we needed to build a new school. So that was the first 9 months, really almost a year of this committee's work, was to pressure test and make a determination on our own whether we thought the better solution was to build a building as opposed to some of these other options.
Sure.
Yes.
Or maybe select board members also. So just to clarify, because I heard it earlier, if you could, there was, I think you stated to a question, there was no feasibility study as to the potential expansion of the schools on there where they are now.
No. So there was no feasibility study done for the addition of a second level to Glover. Essentially,
okay, no, I understand that now. Yes.
Yeah. I'll just complete
Please.
it. So the public records request that came in was from a citizen asking for the feasibility study for adding a second level to Glover. To Glover. When you were referencing a feasibility study, I thought that was the one you were talking about. There's an overall feasibility study that was done as looking how to add 26 classrooms to the district. So that was called a space needs study, I think they did. Not really a feasibility study, but there's a whole thing of that. Drawings, renderings, cost estimates, all of that is available. If you need copies of that, we'll happily provide it.
Okay, no, I appreciate that, but it's so we have these studies out there, and the building committee made the determination based upon all this data, correct?
Correct.
That building off the schools wasn't appropriate.
Correct.
Okay.
And that was there for permanent solutions. Like we're charged with that. The talk of temporary trailers and stuff like that is a short-term temporary solution that we're looking at. That's another avenue we're looking at right now, because we know, with the timeline of the school, that's a need that we're going to have to do. So that will be coming probably over the next year. You'll hear us talking more about those temporary solutions also. But again, those most likely will be trailers on the playgrounds.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.
I have a quick question kind of following up on that temporary solution idea of the trailers on the playgrounds, because I just think of Tucker and the limited amount of space there. And I wonder, where would the kids play if there were trailers there, because it's already so tight? I just wonder, is that even a temporary solution at all locations? It also just looks really tight at the middle school. So I'm wondering if that would only work in a subset of the schools.
If I could, that is something we're trying to address. But I think for tonight, with the topics we're doing, You know what I mean? I just don't want to muddy the waters with the temporary solutions that we're looking at, you know what I mean, for the permanent one we're here talking about tonight. But yes, the trailers are going to be an interesting way of figuring this out. Kristen?
I just asked, so this isn't related really to the eminent domain. It's just kind of some questions that last year I had that I just didn't get a chance to ask. So if, in terms of Article 97, it says the disposition of a parcel is not contrary to the expressed wishes of the person who donated or sold the parcel. How does that kind of work in with having this, be an Article 97 swap if really the land's expressed wishes were for it to be conservation?
Well, I'll let Mike take this one, but yeah, you take it. I have my own answer.
I mean, there are no express wishes for it to be permanent conservation land. And in fact, on the contrary, as I said, what the documents said was the documents provided a process, and the agreement was for taking it out of conservation land by going through the Article 97 process. So there were no expressed wishes in any document from 45 years ago for it to be a perpetual conservation land. And again, they could have done it. They could have said in the deed, perpetual. They could have done a permanent conservation restriction. They could have said it was for 200 years. They didn't do it. This is what we only have what they did. We only have the documents.
Okay. And then I'm not sure if I remember this correctly, but was there federal monies used? And does that have some restrictions?
So we think there was some federal money used. The documents are a little bit unclear. So out of an abundance of caution, in addition to getting the approval of the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs in Massachusetts, with whom Town Council has been working, and 2/3 of the legislature. So Article 97 is not an easy process, right? This is a process, right? So you have to get 2/3 of the Massachusetts legislature as well, along with the Secretary of Environmental Affairs, pursuant to the agreement, pursuant to Article 97. In addition, because of the possibility that there were federal funds used, we would go to the Secretary of Interior's office to get the approval there. And that would be, Town Council has been in touch with the state agency, and there would be, there's been some, the state agency would put him in touch with and put us in touch with the federal agency in order to secure that approval as well. So this is a process. If this is approved in May, that process will start. I mean, it's already started in the respect that Town Council has been talking with, as he's pointed out to you before, talking with General Counsel, with the Secretary of Environmental Affairs on how it would go and whether it's feasible and as he's told us throughout this, it is feasible and it can be done, and this is how we would do it.
Thank you.
So does that same process happen if it's eminent domain? That piece continues regardless of the way the land is?
Yes, I mean the eminent domain is really just an added piece. As I said, we could do the Article 97, not do the eminent domain, and see what happens.
Right.
And then if someone decided that they wanted to file a lawsuit, we could let a judge decide, and then we could, as a town, decide we wanted to do eminent domain, depending on what a judge decides. Or we as a town can decide up front, what do we want to do with this property?
But so just to clarify, so just so I know that I'm understanding it, the Article 97, that happens regardless, that's a process you go through regardless of whether or not you chose to do eminent domain or you
That's a requirement, and that's a requirement that the town agreed to in 1978, and that's why we want to follow what the town agreed to in 1978.
Okay, that's not clear.
Mr. Zulus, just a question. I'm just fascinated about the analysis here. In terms of Town Council's recommendation, as you proposed it to us, is there any type of internal memoranda or analysis that he created in anticipation of this?
Yeah, he sent us a short email, which I don't know if the chair got it. You may have seen that, yeah. So I fully expect, I know he couldn't be here tonight, but he should speak to you all and tell you what his analysis is, and he can give you the legal analysis.
Thank you.
You know, I wish I had the deed because, and this is all down the road. I mean, at the end of the day, if it proceeds, it goes to Boston, where they do the analysis of the 5-point analysis in Article 97. And everything has to be a yes. And I wish I had that deed from the Lamb sisters, because I'm just one person, but I read that, and to me, that's got conservation written all over it. And then, like you said, Mr. Zullis, we can get the lawyers in to argue over what do they really mean by all that. One of the things that I'm trying to focus on here, though, and we talk about like the building of the school, the not building of the school, that the article before us is the land swap. And someone could have reservations about whether or not to build a school, issues that could be fleshed out later. But we never get that far if they don't get the land swap. So, we're all going to go through our own deliberations. You know, I'd encourage people to focus on the land swap part. But while we're talking about the building of the school, because it has come up, we're thinking about something on the order of $75 million.
Roughly around that amount.
Okay, so it's a lot to juggle, and what we're trying to do is, this is a process that started a long time ago, and we're just at this part of it. So I would encourage the Warrant Committee, the best that you can, to focus on the land swap part of it. Steve?
Yes. So my concern is that we spend $200, $300, $1 million on legal fees to get the land swap done and whatever lawsuits come about, and then we don't have a school and we just wasted $1 million. That's my concern, and I think they should be tied together, the school and the land, and it should all be one big package. Not that. So I'm just concerned about us wasting money, which we've done a lot in this town, and I've been here 26 years. That we should do this right and do them as together.
So I think we do our best not to waste money, I would tell you that the purposes of eminent domain is to prevent that. It's to prevent a costly litigation, and we do have town counsel on retainer, and part of the cost of doing business as a town is sometimes you get sued. You can't control that. People can hire a lawyer to sue you, and that happens, right? If we have the eminent domain article, it makes it really hard for us to get sued, and so that's the purpose of it. And so if we have the eminent domain article, I think from what town council you asked him, but my view is, my understanding is, that's a way for us to head off those fees, those costs. And Mr. Chair, I do have a copy of the deed. If you want it, if you need it now. If you
No,
need it.
thank you. Jay was able to pull it up.
Okay,
Thank you.
And you're right. You're right. It does say conservation. There are conservation restrictions in there, but there is no time frame. As I said, there is no year. It's nothing about perpetual. And under the law, if there is no time frame to the contrary, it's 30 years, and that's been the law for 150 years or more. And everybody, I'm not going to presume what people knew 45 years ago, but we do know that people were represented by lawyers. And we do know that there were perpetual conservation restrictions created in other circumstances at that same time. So that's all we know. All we have is the documents.
I get that. And again, this is going to be put into play. We're not the Supreme Judicial Court, and we can argue, right? And we can go back and forth. And Article 97 says express wishes of. So, it'll go up to Boston. They'll figure it out.
Well, I can tell you, it's already. Town council has. I mean, we're trying to, save money, right? So
Mhm.
town council has vetted this with the general counsel of environmental and energy affairs, and I believe including the deed. You can ask them, but I believe so. So this is not a well, let's just see what happens situation. This is something that we've really worked through, and town council has really worked through, and think it's the best solution.
But there's no such thing as a lock.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Do we know if, are you, sorry.
Yes,
to
I'm done.
interrupt.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we know if the state legislature has a precedent of passing, if something is in, I think we can argue it may not say in perpetuity, but the deed does specifically say conservation. Do we know if these Article 97, if the state legislatures will pass that, even if it does seem to go against the express wishes of the deed?
So what we've been advised by town council is that the legislature typically works very closely with the general counsel of environmental and energy affairs, and that's who he's been working with on this.
Okay.
And so we think if the town wants to move in this direction, there's a viable path forward. And as to whether it's a lock, if it's eminent domain, again, you can ask town council, but that's a pretty good lock.
Can I?
Yeah, if I could too. I mean, the process that by which we're going with Article 97 is the process to take conservation land out of conservation, reuse it. So I think, part of what's being talked about is the deed restrictions that were there, that one of them said you shall never build a structure on this land. And that lapsed, right? The conservation restriction that's on there, we're going by the path that they set forward to use Article 97 to take conservation land out. So the mechanism of a land swap was written in as part of Article 97 for extreme purposes like we're facing now.
So when you say it's lapsed and never a building shall be built, but it's lapsed, do you mean like the high school is the lapse, or what was the lapse? I'm sorry, you said something about lapsing.
The deed restrictions that were placed on the conservation land, parcel D656A, and Mike will quote me if I say this incorrectly. There were deed restrictions on there that the land shall be kept, mowed, kept good. And then another restriction that was on there was no structure shall be erected on there. Those are the things that lapsed after 30 years.
Oh, okay. So I just want to make sure, because they've lapsed, no building has been built to date, right, on the lands? Or I'm just wondering, because the high school is so close, was that ever part of this, or was it not?
I don't believe it was.
Okay.
I don't believe it was. But while the conservation restrictions have lapsed, the property is still Article 97 property. And what the town agreed to do back in 1978 was, if we want to use it for any other purpose, we'd go through Article 97.
If I could, Mr. Chair, too, in the topic of costs and things like that, construction costs aren't going down. So the longer we wait to take this first step, the more expensive it's going to be. The other part that's going to come in too, in regards to the legal fees that you referenced there, our committee's exhausted everything. We're going to have to hire separate consultants now to do similar searches for what we're doing and spend money to do that, because we've hit a wall. Like, we've looked at every available land that's out there. Bonbon came up, we chased that down as best we could. For us, I know everyone hates hearing this, but there are no other options. And, for us as a committee. So my intent is, if this did not pass, we would have to hire professionals at an extreme dollar value probably to come in and do this study for us. So that's just another thing when we're talking about costs. And the longer we wait for this, the more expensive it's going to be. Yes, sir.
And Article 97 existed in 1978?
So now we're getting beyond my, I don't know if it was called Article 97. I believe it was, but I would ask town council whether it was called Article 97. There are different there's a different statute referenced, whether they referred to it as Article 97 or not, it's the same process. It's the same process. Secretary of Environmental Affairs, 2/3 of the legislature, and 2/3 of the legislature, and that's it. Well, town meeting. Well, but we wouldn't. Yes, and town meeting will need to do it because we wouldn't even seek that unless town meeting wanted to, unless the residents want to do it. I mean, at the end of the day, right now, it's kind of a binary decision, right? You think we need to build a school or not?
Is it 2/3 approval of town meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we haven't secured any funding, correct? We speak about inflation. I'm just curious if we've secured it.
We don't have a project yet. So, theoretically, if we had to buy land, we'd have to work that portion into it. We don't know where it's going to be built, what type of ledge we might encounter. So essentially, until we get land, it's hard to kind of put a dollar value to a project that doesn't exist.
But previously, you had mentioned that we used the last funding and we were denied the last 2 times.
Yeah, so with Mass School Building Authority, there's a statement of interest that we submit. We've submitted it, I think, 3 times, coming up on our 4th time now. That's a mechanism by which the state refunds certain costs as part of the construction project, right? So as part of that project, they'll refund a certain amount. That percentage that's there is based on certain social-economical factors. The last time we did the school building project, there's legislation we're allowed to utilize that got us a reimbursement rate of 80 to 90%. This time it will be nowhere near that. So part of the problem when I talk about MSBA and the funding for it, once you go into their agreement that's there, we'd be getting a very small percentage, nowhere near where we got before. It locks us into their timeline, their analyses. We'd be starting all over again, and we'd be doing a 7 to 8 year timeline to build out the project. I just want to complete. Over that portion of time, there's a large amount of escalation that would happen over that 7-year period. My intent, I would rather forego MSBA funding, do it at a much faster pace, not realize all that escalation, and not having that escalation offsets that funding. You know what I mean? So doing it in a shorter amount of time, once we have a site, will save the town money rather than tying up for 7 years.
That will be 100% though an override, though, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously, if it does pass, it would be. But I didn't see any avenues for helping the town in special education and building a facility that were part of the new school, correct? I just wanted to.
Those are inherent parts of the overall
Okay.
school program.
I just
So
was
when you
curious.
Yeah, and what it does too is by alleviating the space in the elementary schools, it frees up additional space for special ed that we can't do right now as part of it too.
Okay. And we have no intention on doing any studies to see where, even though it was a different company, DRA Architecture, to see where we are at with the schools and redirecting possibly Pierce to maybe be like a 7th and 8th. We have no intention of looking at that. And this is just the focus, is building the school.
If you did Pierce as just 7.
Like, let's say we redirect, like, to create more space in the elementary schools, because it looked like I sent the group here the 2019 study and it did show that they could build Glover and create 29 from what I see 2 options for creating classrooms additionally. So
those would address only the elementary school.
Yeah, but if we add, let's say we looked at it from bigger picture and we add 6th grade back into it, like, let's say if there was more space.
To pull 6th grade back into the elementary.
Yeah, we could read and do 7th and 8th at Pierce if we needed to.
So now you would be doing 26 classrooms at the elementary school level, plus whatever the 6th grade would need at that same time.
Yeah.
So when you look at that space needs study that's there, you have to then, you can't just be 26 classrooms. I'm not even sure how many classrooms the 6th grade takes up, but what you'll have to do there, or what I'd offer you to do, is look at that space needs study, look at the construction costs associated with each one of those options to add up to it, and look at that total dollar value compared
Okay.
to just this one project.
Yeah, no, I'll happily do that. Thank you.
Mr. O'Rourke.
Yes, sir.
Just if I could, this was something that was mentioned probably about 11 months ago before the same committee that I was not a member of at the time. But I think that there was a year completion date. If everything goes according to plan,
Yep.
very swimmingly, right? I'll be talking. I'm using numbers that were thrown around last year, like 2030, 2031, 2032. Just like I said, perfect. No road.
Perfect trajectory.
Perfect.
Yeah. This kind of plays off Mr. O'Connor's question at the last one. We were talking about Fompon and comparing the two. So with assuming the Article 97 passes in May, we get up to the state legislature, go through that portion and call it another year. So next May we would hit the ground. We could ideally secure funding. I'm theorizing this as I'm speaking right now to kind of give you that trajectory. And in May, if we had full funding for the project, we could build the school out based on what I said last time. I know I gave a longer timeline. That was for MSBA. If we do it perfectly and the town funded it all, it's from breaking ground about a 2 to 3 year construction period. So if we could do it next year in 2024, that would be 2026, 2027, ideally.
Thank you.
Mhm.
If I may, I have a question for the chair of the Conservation Commission. So this is kind of more of a yes or no question, but please explain. As the chair of the Conservation Commission, I guess the Conservation Commission as a whole, and I'm seeing new conservation land being added to this Article 97 proposal. Is that a good thing in your mind?
It is.
Yeah.
If we can take 2.8 acres and give them to the town and get 56 acres back, that's very good.
So a follow-up to that, if we were to place everything in a vacuum, would perhaps you be here at some point asking that all this land be placed into conservation at some point? Yeah.
I missed the question.
Oh, so I guess I'm sorry, it was not articulate at all. Like, has there ever been conversations within the commission to push for more conservation in the town? Like, to ask the towns, you have this municipal use with some protections, but actually move it into full conservation land under your authority?
The simple answer is yes, but I can divide that into two parts. One, we very frequently ask for conservation restrictions.
Yes.
A little bit different. But for private landowners, we very frequently do that. Particularly now with the new cluster zoning. If there's a cluster development, a certain percentage of the land has to be set aside for public use. So we are the recipient of those conservation restrictions. So that answer is yes. Additionally, we're always looking for open space. I'm trying to think of there have been occasions when we've identified property, but we don't have any money. That's our problem. Our annual budget, thanks to you folks, is $2,500, and it's been $2,500 since for the last 31 years.
Don't turn us around.
We don't have the CPA has now given us an opportunity at a potential funding source for open space, and we didn't do it this year. I have no idea how much CPA money had in their budget. But we're now in the planning process to identify parcels to seek CPA funding to purchase the land for open space.
Sure. So as just the municipally owned land, you could say the land estate and others like Algernon Corner, could you forever foresee your committee pushing, if you had the money, everything was perfect, to make Pope's Pond 100% conservation, or to make to make that designation?
Yes,
you would.
That's a very simple and very strong and vigorous yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I have nothing further. Appreciate it.
I have a follow-up to that, Mr. Keenan. His question to you was, do you favor this? My question is, has the Conservation Commission made a vote on a recommendation with regards to this swap?
No, we have not. And I may have misinterpreted your question if you were asking me that. No, I cannot speak for the commission because there is no proposal before us. I thought you were asking
Oh,
conceptually.
He's asking the appropriate follow-up question.
Oh,
I was proposing it as a hypothetical to you because you're sitting here on the road.
No, and the reason I'm so enthusiastic in saying yes is because
I'm
if
sorry.
it's 2.8 acres and we get 56 acres in return, that's wonderful. Because a year ago, we did have an official formal resolution, and we agreed to a swap. And all the issues that you brought up tonight about, the expiration or the lapsing of after 30 years, that was addressed formally by Kevin Freitag before our commission. And we voted, and at that time, we were giving up not 2.8 acres, but we had agreed to swap 6.8 acres, and in return, we were getting 15 acres back. And the Conservation Commission voted 6-1 to approve that swap. That was a year ago. And then the article was withdrawn last year. But that, historically, I think that would give some suggestion as to where my enthusiasm comes from, because I just went from 6.8 and getting 15 back to giving 2.8 and getting 56 back.
So this is
That's
an
a
even
good
better
thing.
deal.
What's that?
This is an even better deal than the
much,
one that
much
your
better.
commission approved a year ago.
Yes.
Is this on the agenda to be revisited? This swap of your commission?
Not formally, but we had a meeting, public meeting, and Sean presented to us the same scenario that you've seen tonight, the same slideshow, on the 15th of February. So we know it's coming, but it's not yet before us as a formal vote.
How soon can it be?
Well, we're meeting
I mean-
on the 14th, but we can't make that because the agenda's already been printed, so it'd have to be April. But we would have a special meeting if that were necessary in terms of sequencing votes between and among the different boards. So we call a special meeting for that.
I have a question. Is this a land appraised? The conservation land appraised?
No, and that's one of the issues that has already been presented to us at the public meeting on the 15th of February. A citizen brought that up, and we're now working on. Again, we don't have any money.
Maybe ask for a loan.
We're sort of.
I'm just curious if it, because if you're getting dollar value to dollar value, like I know you're excited about getting 56
acres.
56, yeah. But if it's sliced up and moved to different, and one's more valuable than the other, I was just curious.
And we are looking exactly at that, and we're looking at it in two veins. One is what's the fair market value, what's the monetary value of the land, and secondly, what's the ecological value of the land.
Yeah.
And that's one of the points that's actually been presented to the Conservation Commission, that after last year's agreement to swap, the state forester came out, and I think that Steve Ivas was with it. I know that Pete Jackson was there, and the state forester walked this parcel of land, and he's actually the one that suggested that you divide it, and the land closest, the approximately 3 acres closest to Blue Hills Parkway, has a higher ecological value than the upland piece closer to Brooksfield. So the school building committee decided, okay, we'll leave that 3 acres alone. We won't take that, or we won't suggest taking that. We'll just go upland and take and ask to take 2.8, and that was based upon the ecological appraisal. That's not an official appraisal from the state forester, but he was present. So we are following through. Great question, and we are trying to get both a fair market value, monetary value, and an ecological value.
Thank you.
Just one follow up on that, because I remembered that there were those two pieces. One thing I can't remember, or I don't know if we went over this, is are those values of equal importance to you? Because is the fair, like if the ecological value is high, does the fair market, like the dollar value, matter if like that land ecologically, I don't know if I'm wording this correctly.
No, you are.
Is one more important than the other from the perspective of conservation?
From conservation perspective, we would err on the side of ecological value, but there may be a relationship between the fair market value and the ecological value. They're joined in there somewhere. Each one will impact on the other one.
Okay.
But building near ecological, will that impact even though that's not being used, but you're adjacent to it, affect the ecological like preserving and
Yes, and that's actually the heart of the mandate for the Conservation Commission. That's what we do. Because that buffer zone that we have jurisdictionally, that's exactly what we look for. If you build within our buffer zone, what impact is it going to have on the resources that we protect? And if there's an adverse impact, we'll deny the permit. But typically when a homeowner comes to us, we try to work with them and adjust the project so that it preserves the ecological value or the resource value. And it still allows the landowner to do as he or she wishes.
Can you explain to me, so transferring Pope's Pond into conservation, I don't know what that does. Nobody's going to build a mall on Pope's Pond right now. And also the acres. Does the acres include the water? So
Yes.
I don't know what that means if we move Pope Ponds into conservation. Can you explain?
Yes, I can. It goes back to the jurisdiction. The town can be like any landowner. They could sell the land to for a 40B development.
Okay.
Is it buildable is the question. Outside that inner riparian zone, that is buildable. That is eligible to be built upon. So it would be the town as owner that could sell it, but it couldn't sell it for affordable housing. Another good social value, public interest. But if it's conservation land, it couldn't be sold.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Rourke, could I ask you another question? So what you're proposing to modify the road or change the road, do we have any estimate of what the cost would be for that?
No, we don't.
Is it a totally new road, or are you kind of building off of what's there?
So technically it's actually a driveway. So
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
one of the new things.
Right.
So it's a driveway that connects up to Gow Road. Within that road, driveway, whatever you want to call it, there's no utilities under there, so there's no drainage or anything. It's basically asphalt pavement that goes all the way up. So when people think about roads and sewers and additional things like that, none of those type of utilities exist.
Yep.
So we were fine incurring that cost, absorbed into the overall project, mainly to make it a better site. Again, preserving that conservation land that's there, pushing it away from home Inc. In doing all that, those type of things. So,
And would you have to shut down Giles Road when you're doing that construction?
I don't think so.
No.
When I look at the way it's phased right now, you could probably leave Gow Road open, construct the other portion of it, and then slowly cut it over.
Okay.
And then once you cut it over, demo the existing road that's there.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
is there any other neighborhoods impacted by, like, you know how Gulliver and those are adjacent, they're right next, they're budding the high school. Has anybody else spoken to the neighbors and gotten there?
Yeah, so we're going back. So we did a number of neighborhood community forums last year for the other way we had the project set up. We're scheduling additional ones now, specifically with Pine Tree Brook. There are concerns of flooding that could, they're in a flood zone. The key thing to keep in mind of that whole thing, the project we do has to do a stormwater runoff to look at the existing site and understand how stormwater runs off of it, and then a post development. We can't make it worse. So by constructing this, their concerns of flooding and stuff like that, we acknowledge them. We're well aware of them. But by building this project, we can't make it worse than what it already is today. Otherwise, they'll deny our permit when we go for a building permit. So while there's concerns that every study that everyone's asking for to be done immediately before May, we don't have the funding for it. We don't have a project for it. Those things will be done. We're not going to get a building permit if we don't do those things.
So then to that point,
Yep.
How would that work? So say the land swap is approved and then now there's pre-work before the so before you have a project and the cost of it, you would have to do the survey work. How would that get funded? Would you be coming back?
Perfect question, because we have a third article that's out there that's not before you tonight.
I was going to say, I don't remember reading.
Yeah, no, a third article is essentially for funding. Because right now, as a committee, I'm proud. We've been together 4 years. We've used $40,000 to get to kind of where you're seeing tonight. We have an article that we voted on the other night for additional funding. So our hope is that the land swap passes in May, And then once we have a project that we can do, we can take that to basically do real conceptual design, incorporate traffic, incorporate stormwater management, look at geotechnical reports to make sure the foundations that we can build it on are fine. All those things that people are asking for, we are going to be doing. It's just this is our first step.
And not to, I'm sorry. And
Oh, no,
so
no.
not to detract, because I know that's not what we're talking about, but just from a curiosity standpoint. So there would it be sort of phased? So you would need to do that in order to then get a project, like to then determine the project and get a project cost, or are you talking that would be all one? Would that be 2 chunks of money, basically?
Yeah, so
Okay.
so in May, that's the third article that we're talking about. We're not talking about funding the entire school.
Right. So it would just
So-
be the funding to
Get us to a point.
get us to the point where you can then.
Yeah.
Ask for more.
So basically, when we get to the point of talking hard numbers and stuff like that, a lot of numbers I quote, the Mass School Building Authority advertises all their construction cost data, and we can at least leverage that for kind of what we're doing, because again, just saying we don't know what the cost will be is unacceptable. So we have to provide those numbers for context for everything. Our goal is to hone in on that a little bit better by engaging the architects a little bit further, engaging engineers a little bit further, and then piecing it together and building up that as we basically will be back here next year to do a similar discussion, hopefully.
Thank you.
And I was just going to say that harkens back to the spending money. We don't want to be spending money until we know town meeting wants to go forward and use this land. So that's really the timing here. Just if town meeting says yes, we think that this is viable, so pursue it. Then we can start spending money to pursue it.
So you're not asking for any feasibility money in the next town meeting?
In this town meeting, yes. I mean, it'll be an article. It'll probably be positioned after the other two, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see what town meeting decides on the other two, and then that'll inform us. That'll probably inform town meeting on whether they want to give us the money.
Do you have a sense of what that's going to be?
The school building committee voted up to $275,000.
Okay.
And I think you'll see that there's a placeholder for that in the town administrator's budget that you'll be getting. I hope next Wednesday night.
Okay. Thank you.
What is this? Tuesday? What is this? Wednesday? Wednesday. Yeah, I hope next Wednesday night.
Anyone else? Oh, we got them, hey?
Nope. Great.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Briefly, some housekeeping, and then we can adjourn.
Not discuss among ourselves.
Oh,
Sorry. Sorry.
sure.
Jay wants to keep the meeting going.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I guess I figured we would have our questions, and then I wasn't saying my opinion.
Sure. Sure. Have at it.
I'll kick it off. I think this discussion is going to be a lot of what's the lesser of two evils. Is it worse to have overcrowded schools, or is it worse to take this conservation land? And those are very good discussions to have. But I guess I would like to throw out here the positives of this. The positives of not only building a new middle school, but building it specifically at this location next to the high school. I think there's a lot to be gained by having a 7th and 8th grade building within walking distance of the high school. You can have 8th graders who are qualified for advanced math, advanced science. Maybe they're really good at art and they don't have the facilities there. They could walk over to the high school and take a class there. The high school, if it's overcrowded, maybe could use some of the space at the middle school. We several weeks ago we talked about that early childhood center at the high school that had to close because they didn't have physical space. Maybe they could make use of some physical space in this new school. I know nothing's final, but there's talk of having a pool at the new school. the high school,
Bar included.
yeah, you could go, yeah, they'd have like a swim up bar and
I think we're
everything.
getting way
No,
ahead of the pool.
that
We
are,
would have a
We need to
swim
fund
up,
the school.
Hold on, one at a time, please. Jay
So
has the
I don't-
floor.
Sorry.
I guess it's
Okay.
because I'm from Texas. I don't think having a pool at a school is an unusual thing. But then our swim team could have their own school. You could have older siblings dropping off younger siblings. I think there will be and there should be a lot of discussion of which is the lesser of two evils. But I did want to throw out that I think there's a real
I do want to
positive.
say something in regards to the lesser of the two evils. We haven't there. That's not the end all of just either building a new school or doing this land. There is that option that I privy to the school building committee that we have yet to see what options are to grow off of our existing buildings. And I sent everyone the 2019 study where it showed what we can do on some of these other schools. And I've yet to see an updated of what we could do, because there is room at Pierce, there is room at the high school to build off of. There's land there. And I don't think it's build a new school or nothing. There are other options. Just, want to put that out there, because I don't want it to be that this is our only option, or our kids are going to be living in the library. Because to your point, or we have overcrowding for the rest. And as the numbers continue, I don't know if we necessarily need a new school. So I just want to point that.
I feel like we've heard that's been done. I mean, they've talked about the different options. They've been doing this for, 4 years. And I think even talking about the 2019 study, we've talked in the past about, even from the standpoint of, like, if you were to go up on Glover, you can't. And then the back, there's land behind it.
It says that you can on the 2019.
That you can go
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
But I think then the other pieces around, I don't know, I just think that there's a lot of information that they've given that talks about why some of these that maybe beyond Glover, but that the other schools that they looked at them, that they didn't work. And so I guess, as opposed to debating the work that they've done, who are all, that these are the two things coming to us. And I think I have to take that these are people who've been working on it for 4 years, that all of those other options have been explored and talked about, and that these are the ones in front of us. And to think, I just don't know that I don't know that that's, in my opinion, where we go. Like, I feel like the options in front of us are.
But we're not debating the school right now.
Exactly, we're not. And so, but that will be the next piece. And so that in itself is inherent in the land swap. So if we're doing that, then the land swap discussion is moot. Because then
JJ's
we're talking
next.
about that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay, then you can go
Oh,
after him.
that's
Don't run over me.
next.
I feel like we could talk about this for a long time. I'm just wondering, what is the timeline for when we have to vote on this and when the warrant, like the article? I'd love to know that, because
Right. I'll jump to the housekeeping, then we'll go right to Judith. Where we're at right now is that we've already voted on some of the articles that we had ready for us. The big budget is being put together Friday and Tuesday. We may have the town administrator select board budget. We may have it as early as Friday, if not Friday, Tuesday. So then we are actionable Wednesday. So what I'm going to say to the committee, while we had talked about having Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday meetings next week, I think we're probably talking Wednesday. Wednesday, we should have a budget so we can get that out. My intent would be on Wednesday is to schedule up all articles that are ready to go, which should hopefully be all of them, which are going to be the zoning bylaws, right? The two bylaws. We can talk about school building committee article, all those, Kidder Library, all those. Hopefully that'll be a long one, so get ready. But if we don't go Monday and Tuesday, we should be rested up and ready to go. And then we go into the next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I think it's like 20, 21, 22, so whatever that is, right? To at that point, I think that's when we would tee up land swap, probably on that Monday.
A vote or just?
Oh yeah, we're gonna have to, because the warrant on our original schedule was due to the printer on the 21st, right? So like I think I said at one of our meetings that I feel like we're in one of those old silent movies where the guy runs right in front of the train. Again, somebody's got to do something about this. We always seem to be like running right in front of that train. So anyway, I think that this gives us enough time. If we need more time, I don't think we're going to have the thing on the 21st, but we can meet on a Saturday. The Warrant Committee hasn't done that in a while. So if that's what it takes. But I think there's enough time for us to get through it. Okay, so that's timeline. Is that, Steve?
So our comments have to be in by the 21st, and we don't get the warrant articles until the 21st?
So that time is flexible. The original, so we're just going to we need more time.
Yeah.
We need it. All right. So there's a little bit of flexibility there. So, and then I don't want to get back to this discussion, right? But like Karen and I have already started, right? She's awesome. We've already started working on the warrant. All right, so we'll be able to plug in the pieces that we get as they're ready, and we'll get this thing done just in time.
I'm sorry. I'm just confused. So, like, we got a lot of work to do, obviously. But this discussion is the reason why I asked. Like, I could talk about this for an hour.
Sure.
Easy, just by myself. I'm sure a lot of people could, too. And I don't know how we do. I don't know. How do we vote on some, like, I don't know. Like, because it's 9, all right, and we can, I don't know. I'm just wondering about this discussion in terms of, I mean, I'm happy to stay here, but I don't know.
Yeah, well, let's see. We don't have, right now,
You don't have a thing to do.
the article that we have at the Warrant Committee with regards to this still says draft on it. So I am told that the actual article, so the actual language of the article is still with town council. Now, we could throw something together and we could vote. I'm not saying anything is prohibiting us from doing that. You know, if we were like, we have to do this now, we could do it now. We can do whatever we want. Sometimes it's good to sleep on it. Like Amanda says, though, we've been having this conversation for this has been going on for 4 years, right? So like, I had originally been hopeful that we could do this now, like tonight.
I have a question related to that.
Yep.
Because I feel like there have been so many things we voted on, and this is not the first time this has happened where like we get things in this tight timing. And I think in the past we voted on draft language, and if it changed, then we re-voted. If there was like a substantive change, is that something we could also do? If like let's say council came back and was like, no, this needs to be different, then we could re-vote because the language would be different.
I mean, the only real language that I can see that's we don't have is the actual meets and bounds of the 2 point something acre parcel that we're talking about. I think we all know what we're talking about here. There's no one who's not on notice as to what the question is. And I think Mr. Zulus kind of boiled it down. It's like sort of it comes down to where do you stand on the ultimate issue, I guess. So that's where we're at. We've had the presentations. We've had the discussion. We're having it now. We can continue. We could go to a vote. We could, if people weren't comfortable with that, we could put it together for, I'm thinking probably not next Monday, with the Monday after that, I think was when we were talking about having a meeting. Or we could even, like, if we wanted to have a meeting on Monday and just address this, we could post tomorrow, this Thursday, would give us enough time for 48 hours of public notice. What do people think?
Just one other. Could it be the Wednesday too next week, the 15th? Or
So we're definitely having a meeting on Wednesday, but we could throw it on the agenda for Wednesday.
But Wednesday, we're going to be discussing like getting the budget.
Yeah, that's like the only night you have to talk budget.
Well, no, we're going to get the budget. I think that we're going to need some time to process that. We're going to need time to process. So we're going to get. So my intent for next Wednesday was we'll have the budget, because all will be revealed. How is the free cash going to be handled? How much is going to go into stabilization? How much is going to go into reserve? And then, if there's any left, where does that go? Right? So we're not going I don't think we are going to be in a position to just jump on that right away. We're going to need to drill down on that. So my intent for Wednesday, was to tee up like all remaining articles except for land swaps. We can have plenty of time for land swap, but if we want to plow into it, we could put everything on the agenda.
And then just defer if we don't get.
And if we don't get to it, we don't get to it, or we go there first.
Or if something isn't ready, then we have the time to.
Yeah.
Not that anything won't be ready.
And so I don't want to dither, but what's the sense of the committee? It's everything from damn the torpedoes full speed ahead. Let's put on our helmets and get in the game. Do it right now. And I'm not getting a lot of support on that. Mm-hmm. Then the next time that we could do it would be Monday. We could, Monday or Tuesday. We file, our 48 hours notice, and then we all come back Monday or Tuesday.
Next week.
Yeah, so that would be next Monday. We could file, we could put a meeting on the calendar and do land swap Monday. I'm sort of getting nods on that. How's that sound?
Yeah, I'd like to digest the numbers and look at it a little bit more, because there was a lot of information sent to us. Sean did a great job, but if we can get that presentation tomorrow or whatever, it'd be good. I mean, I want to digest.
So Monday, would that be enough time to digest?
Yep.
So I get the sense of the committee.
No, I'm going to throw a wrench in this.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Chair, I like your idea, and I just, as JJ indicated, we could talk about this for a long time. And I think you had a kind of plan, maybe, that we could give as much time to this as we can. So I don't know. I'm fine with really anything, but I just wanted to mention that because, I don't want to get bogged down in one meeting and then it's 11 o'clock and we haven't done anything else.
Well,
unless that's how it would work.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I said,
if we did a meeting, if we met on Monday, that would get us to this discussion and a vote a week before my original plan. And it might be by meeting closer in time, it might be fresher. Judith.
I think for the returning members, to the Warrant Committee this year, who went through this similar issue last year, this has to be torturous for you to help all the new people who didn't have your experience last year and know that perhaps we didn't have the same opportunities as you to at least have a base of discussion behind you already. I think it's a complex issue before us, and from the questions and little bit of discussion, it appears that there's a lot of good questions and a lot of, do I really understand this? And I think the vote that we make is important, that when we vote, we feel that we gave it our all to completely understand the issues, and then to feel very comfortable that we voted based on what we learned and our discussions, learning also from that. I'm going to ask quickly, if I could, the returning members, and I know I have watched some video on the work that you did last year. How realistically long did it? Okay, there was an answer. A few nights. Okay, so there's a guideline. Did you feel that the discussion moved along productively, or did you feel like, okay,
If I may,
please.
what's that line like that was then, this is now? Yeah. We have history. So, you know, my sense of this group of people is that I wouldn't be surprised. Who knows what's going to happen? I wouldn't be surprised if we were done in an hour. I wouldn't be.
Yeah, take that.
Right? But like I was saying before, there's no luck. I mean, I think that we've talked about this. We've had the presentations. There's a lot of history. People are referring to comments that somebody else made a year ago. I remember when you said that, right? So I think that we could move quickly when the time is right. Would I be surprised if it took 3 hours? Nope. Right? But hopefully we can get it done in one night. Steve.
My only question is, we haven't heard from council. I would like to hear his opinion. We heard it through Selectman Zulus and Sean, but we have never had him come in front of us on this very important issue.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know, well, if there's somehow we can make that happen.
Yeah. Steve, let me ask this question, because I've spoken with town council, and he's happy to help us. What specifically do you want to hear from?
I want to understand eminent domain.
Yep.
When I was growing up, they took a bunch of houses out and a bunch of things out so they could put a highway in. And they just went in and said, okay, we're going to give you $3 and there's probably worth $10.
Right.
And so I want to understand. And I know there's no money exchange, so it's different. But I just want to make sure that I feel comfortable about we're not going to have major lawsuits because of what they're trying to do. And I'm not a lawyer, so.
Right. Okay, so let me work on getting that. Okay, because again, like that's the question that I spoke to him about eminent domain today, mainly because my concern is that if we put language in our recommendation, could that invalidate a legal ability because of language to proceed? Right. It sounds to me like the reason why they wanted to do the eminent domain is that they feel that if there was a challenge by Home Inc., okay, to undo the manner in which the right to the property was transferred. So if it's done by the Conservation Commission, granting and giving, that's a legal way of doing it. Is that if it was done by eminent domain, there was a possibility of challenging that, saying that they were unable to do that due to a potential public trust issue. That if they did it by eminent domain, you would not be able to raise that legal challenge.
This is what I don't understand, because I always thought eminent domain was you were taking private property to give it to the public.
Yeah.
We already own that land, so why do we have to go to eminent domain?
Yeah. So we'll nail that down.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
That's my understanding. It's just what kind of the way that I see it is that when it's eminent domain, it's the town is doing it, vice the Conservation Commission granting it. So it's like, who has the right to do that? Is there a challenge to their ability to do it? But what we'll do is I'll get that answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So my purpose here is not for me to step into his shoes, but was to give the best answer that I could for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Tom. Mr. Chair, if you do talk to town council, I had asked that of the select board member, any analysis that was put to paper, I would like to see.
Yep.
I would just like to see that. I would assume there'd be some reports in the town in a memoranda or something.
And he only mentioned several cases, but didn't elaborate.
So is that with regards to the whole Article 97 issue?
97 and eminent domain.
Eminent domain.
I think what you just were just discussing.
Yeah.
But 97, eminent domain, slippery slope, bulletproof.
Sure.
So a thought just came to me, and I'm just going to throw it out there. What if, at least tonight, we sort of put the discussion into parts, like eminent domain? No. Laurie says no. Okay, I see that head shaking. It's sort of like bundle our questions into topics, and next topic. No, doesn't work.
I like
way.
that idea. Why are we saying no?
I think that's.
Oh, I don't know.
Maybe because of the time.
I mean, even if it wasn't tonight, like, does that? That's a way to approach
I thought it
even
might,
when we talk about it, I think
I
that
just
makes
thought
sense.
it might
Great Monday.
keep things from running over here and then
Yeah.
over here and
If
back
we want to
here
spend
and
a
up
half an
there.
hour, we could spend a half an hour on one of those topics. I like that idea.
I just throw it out.
And it
Just
could-
came to me.
It could allow us to discuss some of the issues without going into the things where it sounds like we need to wait on guidance from town council. I did have one other thing, and I know it came up earlier, and I think Jay, you mentioned the interest in just hearing, like, is there a precedent for the town taking from the town? Just because I think that's the part that, in some ways, it's like I hear eminent domain, and I think of what Steve, you mentioned, the like taking of private property. So hearing the like reassurance that it's ours to begin with as a town felt reassuring. But I think then you mentioned the like just making sure there's a precedent in the Commonwealth. It doesn't have to be in Milton because I mean we're so small that the odds that it hasn't happened here I would expect are pretty high. But just knowing it's happened would be reassuring. But I agree that the idea of like there could be some things we could address while maybe waiting on some of those other pieces, but understanding not
But
too
then,
long.
of course, it'll be like raising your hand when you're hybrid. Stage your hand on the computer until it's 5 screens ahead. Doesn't mean you can't come back. I don't know. So just seems like we.
Do you want to propose a topic that maybe we could?
Well, when Steve was talking about eminent domain, I think, well, stick that here and then stick this over here. I don't know, just an idea.
I
to
think
about.
I think we need the legal input to get the opinion because I think that letter he sent was a paragraph at best and didn't get into any detail at all. It basically said it's okay, we can do this. Okay.
Maybe the way Judy suggests is how we could like guide the discussion on Monday to just kind of like keep on track. If people need to digest and like formulate their questions on these topics, and if that's
Then you could go home and say, oh, when we were talking about eminent domain, I don't know why I didn't bring this up. You can always revisit. But instead of trying to do this, if you will, a road race, by I'll do a little here and I'm going to cut over to the road over there and then I'm going to cut back, sort of have a little guidance to keep us on track for a good paced discussion that will cover everyone's issues, yet keep us from wandering. That's my favorite word, wandering, which I do.
Well, when you say everyone's issues, I don't know if people want to show their cards or not, but I like this. I don't think I'm surprising anyone in this room. I don't know if people want to say the concerns they have. We've heard concerns about eminent domain. We've heard concerns about have we exhausted all the options for space. Do people want to bring up what concerns do people in this room have that might be subjects for discussion?
Beat you.
There are people. I'm not calling anyone. I'm not the chair.
This actually goes to before when you beat up me. And I can't. Oh, I think it was Allison. She mentioned that she hadn't actually seen papers on some of the solutions from some of the meetings or options, actually. And I believe that we got a letter into our inbox from somebody that has filed an OML concerning meetings that nobody can find minutes of. So was some of this information in those minutes, in those meetings? Do we have it? Do we know it? I see some of our questions almost going to that. Do we actually have every piece of information that we would want to have? We may not need it.
Well, what do you feel is missing?
I don't know what was filed, but we got that letter about the OML that's tied up at the Attorney General's office because of apparently overabundance of this, not from this town, but all over. And so it's tied up to be reviewed. And they mentioned in our letter, it mentions specific dates that there are minute meetings that haven't been recorded. So how do we know it's in there? Do we have I think Allison, and I'm not, please correct me.
No, you're doing great.
Okay. I'm not trying to speak for you.
No, you're fine.
Is there any information that we're missing before we really get into this? Is there a document that could change someone's mind about how they're going to go? I don't know.
I feel like there's information you're missing. I guess I would go.
I don't know what it is.
I guess I would go the other way. Is that where are your questions?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, given everything that we've been told and the information about it and the data, are there areas where you feel like, is there something that you have a question about that hasn't been answered? I guess that's the way I would think about it. Do you know
I
what
would
mean?
think, if I may bounce off Allison again, is that?
Yep.
Thank you. It seems to me that there is this question that keeps popping up about what options there were, and we are assured none of them are good or as good as this option that we're going to vote on. But we don't seem to have any hard data on that. I think that's what you were saying.
I
don't
have yet to
know
see
if
like a feasible study on the build outs or
the build outs.
Yeah.
And so forth.
And I'd also like to see like enrollment, actual projection. Like NASDAQ's not actual. It's just,
What was that information in any of those meetings that we don't have a record of? Does anyone feel that we should have it, or it's okay to proceed without it, or I don't know.
Well, I guess my question. Sorry, I didn't interrupt. I guess my question would be, the thing before us is the land swap, right? And
Right.
so it's not, and so I see where you're saying, like, if that informs your thoughts around if we need to do the land swap, that I understand. But we're not voting on that building yet. We're voting on whether or not we agree that the town can take this land for the purpose of a school. And if we don't approve the school or the funding for that school, then this land goes back. And so those other questions could be answered, but I don't know that they impact this decision because it's for 5 years that we're talking about. So I guess that's where like, I think there can be a lot of questions, and I think that they're important, and I'm not trying to shut down conversation, but I think the article in front of us has to do with the land swap. And what information do we have with respect to that? And I know that there are legal questions that you want to get answered, and I think that those are the areas where it's like we're filling in the blanks on the land swap. I think the other conversations are important, but I feel like for us to move forward with this, that's later. Just my opinion.
Yes,
No, that's
I
6
agree.
months from now. We'll talk
Right.
about that a lot.
Right.
And I think I would just follow on with that. That I think that goes to some of the being smart about money. And Steve, I know you made those comments earlier about making sure we're not wasting money. So I think that's where kind of looking at this as it is and not kind of bringing in some of the other things helps with, approaching it in a logical and kind of chronological way to make sure money doesn't get wasted. I do know the feasibility studies have come up, I think, every time we've talked about this in prior years too. And one thing I do wonder about in terms of, again, going back to the idea of using money wisely is I feel like I've heard compelling reasons why building on the existing schools, there are real issues with that. And I don't know the exact cost of feasibility studies, but I do know that they're not free. And I just think if there are really compelling reasons for why something isn't an option, then I would worry that feasibility studies for something that there are just really strong reasons for why they wouldn't work would be wasting money.
But I think what's going to happen is we're going to vote on land swap. The town meeting's going to vote on land swap, but they turn it down, then that article gets pulled because there's no reason to spend $275,000 on feasibility if we didn't agree with the land swap. The town meeting didn't agree.
I mean feasibility. Sorry, I should have been more clear. I mean feasibility studies for building on the existing schools that I feel like I've heard compelling reasons why it's just not even worth pursuing additional feasibility studies. Just looking at some of the pressure points of, my kids are in elementary, but hearing about the cafeteria in the middle school and just the when you add more classes, you also have to think about those spaces. Sometimes I think there are limitations where I'm saying just thinking about feasibility studies on the building on of existing schools, I think there could be reasons why it would be wasting money to just go down.
Well, we did it for Fonfon, so we would have to do it we could do it. The school committee gave money for Fonfon to do a feasible study, and it was about But anyways,
I think it's that you need to have I think there should be a strong understanding that it's workable. Sometimes you think this could be an option and let's do a feasibility study. But I think sometimes, even in our own personal decision making, there could be something we're looking at, we're looking at buying a house and you put in an offer and get an inspection. Sometimes you see something where you're like, this is not going to work. So I'm not going to pay the $500. That was a while ago. It's probably more now. But I'm not going to pay the $500 for the inspection because I'm ruling it out for this other reason. So I just want to put out there that feasibility study, they can, I think, be expensive. And I just want to raise that from the perspective of not wasting money.
Speaking of studies, did they supply any sort of traffic? They said they were going to do it after, but this affects voting on the land and how it would affect, they would do the road, but and to me is very challenging as it is. So I was just curious if there was anything on that information, if we had.
Seems like we're going to get it all at the end. Get the land.
Did you want to?
I think he's mentioned that he was going to give it to us after.
I think it would be in order. Mr. O'Rourke, there was a couple issues raised.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. In regards to the open meeting law complaint, I just wanted to address that really quick.
I would love to hear what you have to say because it's all just floating around.
So let him go.
Yeah. So, as I stated multiple times, we're a committee of volunteers, right? We were deficient on our meeting minutes last year. Ms. Sheffield filed an open meeting law complaint. All those minutes are posted. We've had a meeting with the town council in executive session to discuss that. And we have basically answered that open meeting law complaint. I think there was a recent public records request for additional meeting minutes. Again, we fell behind on them. We're a bunch of volunteers. We're doing our best. We issued, I believe last week, what we had as draft minutes and all the other approved minutes that we have. So all those have been filed.
Oh, last week.
Last week for the recent ones. The ones for the open meeting law complaint last fall, we issued them last fall and then had a follow-up meeting with town council. So the comment that you made about the open meeting law complaint is closed, at least internally for us.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
Where is it? Where are they posted?
They're posted on the town website. If you go into the school building committee site, there's meeting minutes associated there. We're working with the town administrator to open a OneDrive so we can upload all the previous presentations for people to see. The presentation tonight I'll forward along after.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for addressing that.
Oh.
Is here, if anybody's got any questions.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm here.
I think, Emily was talking about feasibility studies about, I don't know if this is related because I hear you, Amanda, about land swap, but I think it's important that you address Allison's concerns about building on existing lots. And I know you addressed it extensively last year and how the expense, and you didn't want to go into temporary measures, but I think if you gave us a 5-minute why temporary measures might be more expensive than the proposal you're doing, and also why some things can't be built in existing structures.
Yeah, so some of the background, just to as Mike alluded to for the committee, we're a mix of construction professionals. Myself, I'm a vice president and director of engineering for WSP Engineering. I sit on the board of directors for Construction Managers Association in New England. I've been on it for 3 years. That's just me. There's 8 other members on my committee with similar resumes. We took the study that was done, like the feasibility study previously done for space needs. We scrubbed that. We digested everything from that and looked at some of those options and deemed them unfeasible. Specifically, the one that gets thrown out there all the time is building on a second story to Glover, all right? The window for a construction period for an elementary school, kids get out at the end of June. They're back in September. So you have about a 2-month window to build on top of the existing school. If you don't build on top, if you say you do that, you've got a certain number of kids there with no other space to go to. So how do you construct that school in that shorter time frame? You can't. So us as a committee are not going to waste additional money to study that, even when the architect tells us the foundation can't support it. So when the foundation can't support it and your construction window is so small, us as a committee look at it with our backgrounds of professionals and we say it's unfeasible. We're not going to spend additional money to do that. The other ones that are there of adding on to the schools, we've studied those. As we start looking at those and you start looking at the cost of them, just building the structure, and then looking at, now you take it into an operational thing, moving kids in and around the school, building out the bathrooms and stuff. Take those dollar numbers, start adding them together if you want to try to piecemeal it together, and then look at that overall cost. It doesn't work. So again, we don't want to spend additional money at the town and waste it on studies. Us as a committee can look at it and say it doesn't make sense.
And just because I'm an accountant, and you gave us a number for the new school. You said 75 million. You think?
Correct.
What would, if you had to make a solution by adding structures to existing schools, what would that cost?
I don't know, but what I can tell you is in the feasibility study that was done in 2019, there are construction costs for each one of those options. I don't know them off the top of my head, but if you look at those, add 30% to them, because that was 2019 post-pandemic. Construction costs since then have skyrocketed. So when you look at those numbers, add them up, and then put a scale to them for what they are now, and I can guarantee you it's going to be well above $75 million.
So what you're saying is the cost is higher and the feasibility of actually constructing them without disrupting our existing school kids' education doesn't work.
Correct. There's a number of factors when you talk about augmenting the existing schools, construction-wise and operationally, that just don't work. So we've been together 4 years, holding public meetings, studying all this stuff. We're not just talking. about sports who were studying this stuff very diligently. And we came to a quick conclusion a while ago. I mean, we aborted the elementary school. That was the preferred option that the architects told us at the time. We as a committee took it deeper and said, actually, an upper middle school might work better. And here's that one project that we can do. And if we do a couple of things here, we're addressing everything top down. So we're Fontbonne would have been a portion, right? We talked about we'd have to add on to the middle school. Combine both of them, it was going to be added up over that cost. But Fontbonne was an option that we dove into head first and studied it down as best we could to do it, knowing that Gow Road was a better option. But as I said, you couldn't have Gow Road with Fontbonne existing because essentially they cannibalize each other. So we went with Fontbonne as best we could. Fontbonne fell apart organically. There was nothing we did. We were fully in on it. And once that fell apart, this is, as I always said, was the backup plan and why we had to pursue a parallel path for it.
Mr. Rourke,
Yes, sir.
the numbers, just going off of JJ's question, is that 75 million number, and I know there's wiggle room, is that under today's
Correct
calculation?
Yeah, so just background for that. The school size that we're looking at is roughly 100 to 115,000 square feet. The 75 million, I think the chair threw out there is the number. I mean, there's a construction cost of about 75 million. There's additional soft costs that are going to be in there as far as architects and engineering fees, but the construction cost of school, rough number is 75 million.
So just straight up building we're plopping down in the desert, 75 million bucks. No infrastructure, nothing. Right?
No infrastructure and everything, but the design cost of architects, engineers, all that stuff. What you essentially would call soft costs as part of the OPM cost to have an owner's project manager administer all the construction because I don't have that much time on my hands. I'm trying, I really am, but I don't. Those are additional costs that would go into there too.
Yeah. Understood. So, and I know you don't have the numbers, so this, if you can't answer it again,
do my best.
To the building off our schools, are you saying that number would be over $75 million?
So.
And like I said, I know you don't have the numbers.
No. I'm trying to phrase my response properly, but essentially to get to a solution that we're proposing at Gow Road, which there's a top to bottom space needs thing. The ones that were prepared under that study were only at the elementary level. They did look at the middle school, but like I mentioned, that build out that they were doing back there doesn't work. So we'd have to come back and reevaluate that. But when you piece together those individually costs and add them up, it will cost more than the overall project that we're proposing at Gow Road.
Thank you.
Could you address the traffic?
Yeah, actually traffic. So when we were going through with our project last year, having the school on the bigger porch, taking all the conservation land, building it there, traffic is actually something that we had lined up. There's a gentleman, Vinod Kalakiri from BHP. We're leveraging contacts within our industry to get like really inexpensive design services. So what we asked them to do was come in and do a traffic study, and that's all he does is educational facility traffic studies. So we asked him to come in and do that. We had to pull that away at the end because we had to divert money for the BSC surveys that we were doing. So the traffic was on our books to do, but we thought of this better plan to utilize less conservation land, and that's kind of why we pulled it back from there. Part of the new funding that we're doing, that's one of the specific things we want to look at.
So can I piggyback on that question? Knowing that how would you take into account the development that's going on, that's proposed on Canton Ave? Isn't there a large 40B that's going there? So would your traffic study take into account their traffic? Do you know what I mean? Is there a way, or are they separate? Because that would be X number of years out that would impact it.
Yeah, I think that would probably be considered like an existing condition when they do the traffic study. The good thing with those projects is we can leverage what data they already have and utilize as an input. The key thing to keep in mind too is this isn't a building that we're building for all these kids moving in town. They already exist here. So what happens is we're reallocating buses and moving them around. So we're spreading them out more evenly too. So that's one of the things I'm interested to see how it affects too.
Just as a clarification, I think the ice house is going to be basically right across the street, correct?
Yep.
So just so I'm clear, and thank you for the question. There were studies done on both, but they're not really.
We've never done a study for the school
That's
traffic-wise, but what I'm saying is by the time we come around to do traffic studies, we can leverage those existing ones from 40B projects, use those as, call it theoretical data that's there for what the full build-ups of theirs will be, and we can utilize those as inputs into our study.
Thank you.
No, my hands are not up.
No, that's fine. I'll be right over here.
I don't have my glasses on. I thought you were looking, thinking, I was asking a question.
Do we want to continue? Do we want to take a break?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Well,
Is there
that's
anyone
that.
Opposed?
That's good.
The motion carries. Go in peace.